Are you struggling to find bike friends? Or perhaps you already have some wonderful riding friends, but you would like to create more of a bike community in your town? In either case, you might want to consider starting your own bike club or a recurring group ride. That's what Erica Davis did. Erica is the founder of the Crank Queens, which is a thriving mountain bike community in my town, Boise, Idaho. And in this podcast interview, she shares how she got the group started, how she's built it in to what it is today, and how you might be able to do the same thing in your town. Even if you have no interest in starting a group of your own, stick around. We talk about tips for joining a group ride for the first time, ways to be more welcoming and inclusive, and how to find bike friends. Okay. Erica Davis, thank you so much for being here. We are going to talk today about how you have built an amazing mountain bike community and how other women might be able to do the same thing in their areas. But before we jump into that, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So thanks for having me first off on the podcast. Super excited to be here today. So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, just outside of the Seattle area. I was not a mountain biker until I moved to Boise about 6 years ago. I moved here because I met my husband and he's from here. So we call Boise home. And in my spare time, I've always been really outdoorsy, hiking, road cycling. Mountain biking and skiing were new experiences when I moved to Idaho, so love adding that to kind of our list of things to do in the outdoors. And just grew up, spending a lot of my time camping and hiking and fishing with my family. So I've always loved getting out in nature. Professionally, I've mostly worked in coaching and leadership development. I'm a wellness coach, but my kind of corporate background is working with executive leaders and teams to optimize their performance and development within organizations, and building nonprofit organizations. And so I've always loved, especially working with women and empowering them, whether that's professionally or with their outdoor adventures. I've kind of historically been that friend where someone wants to try snowshoeing or backpacking or hiking and like, oh, I can teach you how to do that. And so a lot of my life has been spent helping women to get active and get outdoors and try new things and really inspiring them to do something that maybe they thought would be challenging or beyond their reach. I also have two wonderful stepchildren. They're 14, so they just started high school this year, which is super exciting. And we're mostly looking forward to them starting to drive really soon.
Because then you don't have to be the taxi
exactly,
anymore.
exactly. So yeah, two awesome stepkids who are also very active and outdoorsy with us, very avid mountain bikers themselves, and race on our local NICA team, which is the National Interscholastic Cycling Association. And my husband and I are both level 3 coaches for NICA and have been for the past 3 years. So spend a lot of time outdoors on our bikes and in nature. And really that is our passion as a family. And my personal passion is really equipping women to do that for themselves and not have to rely upon their husband or partner or boyfriend to get them out there, but just building that confidence for women in the outdoors.
So your group, Crank Queens, it's like grown into this big, amazing thing.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the very early days. Why did you first start that group?
Yeah. My origin story, as my stepdaughter calls it.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved, like I said, I moved to Boise back in 2017. I met my husband. Neither of us were mountain bikers at the time. I come from a road cycling background, having lived in Portland for about 15 years and had done, some casual races and community events there and bike commuted, but had never tried mountain biking because I had a lot of guy friends that mountain biked, and honestly, they made it sound really scary. It seemed like someone always like broke an arm on their weekend adventures, and I was like, that's not really for me. That's just a little bit too intense. And when I moved to Boise, I met a friend who invited me to check it out. She said, hey, do you want to come mountain biking with me and a group of women? And I was like, sure, I know how to ride a bike. How hard can it be? Right? Famous last words. And so I showed up to Camel's Back Park on a Monday evening, and there were probably about 60 women there with a group called the Dirt Dolls.
Mm-hmm.
And she let me borrow her spare mountain bike. And so I showed up and I was really proud of myself. I rode up, I think, Owl's Roost to Kestrel maybe. And that was a really big ride for me at the time. It did definitely feel very intimidating. I was fit and in shape, but mountain biking was kind of like this whole new level of challenging that. But getting to experience it with other women who were so positive and encouraging, and just being able to show up and say, I've never tried this, and have someone coach me through it was incredible. And so I began riding with the Dirt Dolls and learning how to mountain bike with that group of women. They were around for about 10 years in the Boise area, and were really the foundation of getting a lot of us into the sport, which is really amazing. So I'm super thankful for the work that they did and the foundation they laid. So fast forward a couple years, later, I was actively mountain biking really consistently, riding a lot with my husband and his buddies, still riding with the Dirt Dolls once a week when they were offering rides, and had started racing. And I really began to notice that I wanted to ride a lot more, and I wanted to ride with women. As much as I love my husband, I really enjoyed riding with other women who are more at the same skill and fitness level that I was at. And so in 2019, I just put a group text together of women that I knew who enjoyed mountain biking, and just started saying, hey, who wants to get up early and hit, Shane's Loop with me at 6 a.m.? Who wants to head up to Bogus on the weekend? And we just started this group text, probably about a dozen women on the group text. And after some time, one of the women said, hey, I think that we should like have a name, like be like a thing. And so, because we were riding together, at least 2 or 3 times a week at that point, and really loving it. And for me, at least personally, also just seeing a lot of improvement in my fitness and my skill level. I was starting to invest in clinics, and really just building this passion for the sport. And so I did, kind of like a group poll of a bunch of different names, and Crank Queens was the one that got the most votes. And so I started a bigger group chat that women could join through an app, and just began organizing rides. And, for me, I think that's one of the skill sets that I bring. I'm maybe not the fastest rider or the most technically skilled, but I am really good at organizing. And so just bringing that gift to the group of getting women together, having a plan. Some nights we'd go and ride and then go get drinks afterward and hang out and talk about, family and jobs and all that good stuff. And then from there, someone said, hey, we should have a logo. I have a friend who's a graphic designer, and let's see if she can help us out. And so, it really just kind of grew from this group text of 12 women back in 2019 to now being 80 plus members and growing. And so it's really been this evolution of, in a lot of ways, my passion project of something that I loved doing and taking my skills of organizing and bringing women together to really this full-fledged organization that's recognized by our local trail association and has sponsors, and does a whole lot more than just mountain biking at this point to really help women be healthy and get active and build community.
So you mentioned that it's now become a membership, that you have these 80 members. That's like a little bit unusual, I think, for a lot of folks listening in terms of like their groups or their clubs. Why did you decide to go with the membership program, and what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for, quite a few years, I was really running the Crank Queens out of my own personal budget and some really kind donations from a couple of our local groups that do fundraising. And I really got to a point, looking at other organizations that were largely volunteer based, I was just realizing that that wasn't financially sustainable at the end of the day. And there needed to be some mechanisms to bring in revenue for the organization so that I could offer more programming, that we could have more resources, that we could just do more. At that point, I was already scholarshiping women to race and to be a part of clinics, and I wanted to offer more of that. I wanted to offer more wellness-based content. I find that women, once they start riding with me, would then have questions about, what do you eat when you train, and how do you train, and how do you find time to train when you have kids, and all these questions that were kind of the bigger picture of everything that we need to do off the bike so that we can really enjoy our experience on the bike. And so really wanting to offer more programming around that for women who want to take their riding and their community to the next level. One of my core values with that is I still wanted the group rides to be free to any women who want to participate. So I've followed that model since starting the membership program, where we still offer free rides to women who want to just come out and meet some women to ride with and connect. There's no obligation to join for women who show up for a ride, but really having kind of like that next level for women who, they want to learn more about nutrition, they want to learn more about training, they want to build that deeper community by attending a retreat or an event that's not just about getting out on the bike. And so it was this great combination of being able to offer more while also creating an organization that could be financially sustainable in the long run through that membership-based community. I also really have found, especially in the past couple of years, that women really want that community connection, that riding our bikes is kind of the pathway to make that connection. But I've heard from a lot of women who show up and say, I've had a really hard time meeting people. I just moved here and had a hard time connecting. And honestly, for me, that's part of why the organization started, was because I wanted women to get it out and be active with. And so really facilitating that connection piece through having that membership access has been really cool, just to
Yeah.
see, kind of what that's added.
I know that there are a couple other groups like yours, like the Women Mountain Bike in Salt Lake has a
Mhm.
similar program. Did you look to any of those groups or reach out to them to help you when you were deciding to create your program? Or yeah, are there any other groups across the country that you've connected with?
Yeah, I mean, definitely have looked at different groups online, but a lot of my kind of thinking and modeling around the membership program came from looking at other membership programs outside of the industry, specifically for women. Um, and a lot of those, also being based kind of in the wellness industry or outdoor industry. And then I also met with those individuals who have experience in, getting sponsorships and more of that side of the organization as well. And, going to them and sitting down and saying, hey, this is all new to me. Where do I start? How do I approach organizations for sponsorships? Um, and really getting that insight on the sponsorship side of things as well. So I would say probably drawing more on the expertise of people who have done memberships and sponsorships outside of the bike
Okay.
industry, more so just to kind of get a perspective that's maybe a little bit broader, and thinking a little bit outside of the box.
Going back to the early days again, what advice would you have for other ladies who would like to start something similar? Maybe they just want to start doing like a once a week group ride with
Mhm.
some friends. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I think start small. I think one thing that I did learn looking at other organizations, I would say primarily organizations that have not been able to sustain their efforts, is that, for most of us, this is not a paid gig, right? This is just something that we're doing out of our own passion and desire to get more people on bikes. And so really starting with what's realistic for you to manage and maintain, and then inviting other people in. So about a year ago, one of my I would call them advisors or mentors in this process, he said, Erica, I think you really need to start an ambassador program. And I
Mhm,
was like, oh, I like that idea.
mhm.
And that really just took off immediately. I have 8 ambassadors currently. It's an annual commitment. So I'll actually be reaching out to find new ambassadors for this next round for next year. But that was a way that I was able to take my time and expand it. So instead of Erica having to be at every single event and the face of things, having 8 other women who have similar values and similar mindset, especially around cycling and working with women, who could show up and lead a ride or a paddleboarding event, or something that they're passionate about that maybe has nothing to do with cycling
Mhm.
but helps get women connected. And so I would advise people to think about who they can partner with and bring in to help them with that process, so it's not all resting on them.
Yes. Yeah, going back to the women mountain bike, that was the group I was a part of when I lived in Salt
Mhm.
Lake. And the lady that started that is actually no longer even a part of the group. And she was able to start it and create structure around it. And it's now
Mhm.
its own thing, which is pretty amazing. And
Yeah.
leadership is shared and taken over time
Yeah.
too. Um, those first 12 friends you had, how did you find those friends? I think that's something that I hear from a lot of women is that they just like can't even find friends. Like, how am I going to start
Yeah.
this group text message with ladies that don't exist yet?
Yeah, yeah. So, I had been riding with the Dirt Dolls, and so some of those women were from that
Hmm.
group. There were also some meetup groups that my husband and I were riding with where I would show up and I would, introduce myself to the women in that group and get to know them. And then some of it was just being out on the trails. And, if I would run into some women, just talking with them and, asking if they wanted to ride together, being up at Bogus and running into women who maybe were out with their husbands and didn't have the best experience riding downhill with their husbands and saying, hey, do you want to come ride with us instead? So a lot of it was just being out there in the community, going to other groups that were organizing rides, being a part of the Dirt Dolls. A lot of it was just putting myself out there
Hmm.
and putting the invitation out there.
Yeah, I think that's
So,
huge. That's how, when I've moved to new cities, I've always just, um, asked, like, if I run into a lady a couple times, I've seen her 3 times out on the
right?
trail. The like fourth time, I'll say, "Hey,
Yeah,
can I get your telephone number? Would you
yeah,
want to go ride
yeah.
sometime?" And that is scary, but it's worth it.
Hmm.
I've never had anybody say, "No, I don't want to ride with
Right.
you." Yeah.
Yeah. I find at least with women, they're usually pretty appreciative to find other women to ride with.
Yes.
And honestly, even sometimes my husband would be out and he would run into, some wives of some guys that he rides with and be like,
Mhm.
hey, you should go ride with my wife. So a lot of it was just word of mouth, women inviting their other friends, running into people, being at yoga class and finding out someone was a mountain biker and saying, hey, we should go ride together.
In terms of leading group rides, what kind of tips do you have?
Yeah. So tip number one, I do have folks sign a waiver and I'm really clear on our website of what's expected. So we have a FAQ page that outlines, what can you expect when you ride with us? What do you need to bring with you? What level of skill do you need to have? We have never been a teaching organization, and our rides are, in full transparency, they're not for women who don't know how to ride a mountain bike. Um, there are clinics we can direct them to, and even clinics that we host for free to help women get on a bike and get comfortable with that. But just being really clear about what they can expect when they show up. So, is this going to be a more intermediate ride? Is this going to be a social ride? Are we going to stop at every trail junction? I remember being at a bike maintenance class for women and I said something about a no drop ride. And a woman said, oh, I thought that meant that there wouldn't be any like drops that we had to ride. And I was like, oh my gosh, this was so insightful because I knew coming, especially from road cycling, that no drop meant that like we weren't going to leave anyone in
Right.
the dust, right?
Right.
And this woman thought it meant she was going to have to go down any features. Which either way, I guess kind of communicates it's maybe more of a beginner friendly ride, but it was really insightful of, oh gosh, I need to make sure that I'm explaining the
Mm,
terminology
yeah.
and not making assumptions. So I have tried through both our website and our social media account to, and even reposting some of your content that you create through Femme Cycle. How do we make sure that we're not kind of having this weird, mysterious language or lingo that makes it intimidating or creates a barrier for women to participate? I will have women who email me or message me on Instagram and say, I've never ridden with you, you know, basically like, can I come out and ride? And I'll just ask them some questions about like, well, where do you usually ride? And just kind of get some information to make sure that I feel like I can confidently say like, yes, this would be a great experience for you. I'm not going to take a beginner out to a more advanced trail like Wilson Creek. I'm not going to, um, ask someone to come and ride downhill with us who's, maybe just getting introduced to the sport. But really trying to make sure that I'm being as transparent as possible for what to expect. Um, and then, as we're out there riding, if I'm noticing someone who maybe is not as aware of some of the trail etiquette, just being like, hey, mentioning that information. In a way that's, not intimidating or making them feel bad, but, helping them get access to the information so they can grow their knowledge and expertise.
On these group rides, if somebody new comes, do you have any tips on how to be welcoming, how to be inclusive? Have
Mm-hmm.
you found any kind of best practices in that area?
Yeah. So if I'm the leader for that night, definitely, introducing myself to that individual, trying to find out a little bit about them. I mean, I think just a good kind of like welcoming tip in general for any sort of event is if that woman says, oh, I, work at such and such, or I'm from X part of the country, or whatever. I typically know someone else in that group that maybe has a similar background or experience and say, hey, can I introduce you to? And then making that introduction so I'm not the only friendly face that they know, but trying to quickly help them get integrated into the group through knowing a bit about their common experience and how that might relate to someone else and connect them with someone else. And I think having the ambassador program has helped with that because there's a variety of faces leading rides. So it's not just my face there, but really helping them to connect with other women quickly in the group through shared backgrounds and experiences.
You had mentioned having new women reach out to you ahead of time to make sure, the group is a good fit. And do you have any other recommendations for women who want to join a new group? You know, what should they do ahead of time?
Yeah. So yeah, I think reaching out to the group leader is great. Asking, not being afraid to ask questions. I would also say bringing a friend. I mean, I showed up to my first Dirt Dolls ride because a friend invited me. So bring a friend. Maybe you have a neighbor who also wants to start mountain biking with a group of women. So invite her to go with you. Um, and I think too, just when you show up, being honest about like, hey, I'm new and I want to meet some new riding friends. Like, be clear about what you want, which I think is sometimes hard for us as women, but don't be afraid to show up and say, hey, I'm new. I just moved into town. Excited to check out the trails. I've never been on this route before. And just being vocal about what you're wanting to get out of the group as well.
Aside from starting a group, do you have any other suggestions on how you can get more involved in the community and build, or maybe even help build a bike community in your area?
Yeah. So we're fortunate enough in Boise to have SWIMBA, our local trail association. I think that is a great place to start if your community has a local trail association, whether it is mountain bike specific or maybe just a broader trail association, getting involved there. Oftentimes those organizations, they're doing advocacy, they're doing trail building. Our organization offers bike mechanic clinics for women in partnership with us. So they really do a lot to give back. Even showing up to do a trail maintenance day, if you're new to the community, as a way to get to know people before you get out on the trails. So I think leveraging some of the local organizations that are already in place is a great place to start.
Aside from, just the early days of texting friends and word of mouth, has there been anything you've done to like market yourself?
Instagram is really the main thing. Yeah. So when we have, officially got a logo and really became more of an official group, I did start an Instagram account. I actually don't have a personal Instagram, so it was my first time on Instagram. But I think that's been probably one of the most effective ways. We had an Instagram account before we had a website. I'm not on Facebook, so that's why we don't have a Facebook account. Simple as that. But I did find that for some women who weren't on Instagram, that was a barrier to find information. And so then I did actually work with that same graphic designer to create a website so that we could have rides posted and a little bit more details on what to expect to come out and ride with us and just more information about the organization in general. So, I think leveraging some of those social media venues are great. I know other women's groups that have, private Facebook groups where they're sharing information. We now have a private members channel where we have forums that for women who join the membership can get in there and connect on, like trail information or planning trips or things like that. But for us, it really started with word of mouth and Instagram for marketing.
Very good. I've got 3 final questions for you, but before I do that, where can folks come connect with you for Crank Queens as well as your coaching business?
Yeah. So for Crank Queens, our website is crankqueens.org and our Instagram handle is Crank Queens Boise. And then for my wellness business, it's wellnesswitherica.com and Well with Erica on Instagram.
Very good. And we'll include those links in the show notes too.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay. First question for you is, what bike or bikes do you ride?
Oh, well, I have a few. So Currently, I ride a Trek Super Caliber for racing. I do a lot of endurance mountain bike races. And so I've been racing on that for 2 seasons, I think. And then I have a Canyon Lux that is just kind of like my fun trail bike. So
Very good. Second question is, what is your favorite place you've ever ridden your bike?
that is a really hard one. Can I give you 3 favorite places?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so Post Canyon and Hood River in the fall, which we're actually doing a retreat there next month, which I'm really excited about. Anywhere in Bend, but specifically riding Swampies, like the Swampies shuttle, where you ride from the Swampies trailhead down into town. And then I really love the Fisher Williams Trail in Idaho, outside of Stanley.
Final question is, what is your favorite thing about riding your bike?
It is an experience where I'm totally focused on just being outdoors and being in my body. And it really helps me to just let go of overthinking or stress or the things on my to-do list that are not done. And it's a place where I'm fully present.